Okay, I just made the video about fear and I forgot to talk about something that, again, it might be obvious to some people, but as I become more clear and become more spiritualized, not saying I'm special, I'm just saying I'm working on spiritualizing my life through my path that I'm doing, through this Sahaj Marg path, which, like I said again, not everybody has to do the same thing. Different things work for different people. But for me, it's working, so I'm not reinventing the wheel at this point. I'm just following, and it's automatically making these things happen. That's what's kind of interesting. That's why it's called the natural path, because it's about something that's simple and natural, and it's evolutionary, and it happens almost spontaneously. I mean, we have to have effort. And this is something that maybe when I did TM and that I expected, like I had more magical thinking with that, where I thought, oh, I should just kind of be lifted away from these problems, and oh, I'll go into a state of enlightenment and I won't have to deal with all these ugly issues and these problems that I have, and issues that I can't seem to come around and get control of. And it requires effort. Self-effort is important. But anyway, the brain, our brain is designed to have a function where, sorry, there's big jets flying by. I got some training going on today. The brain is designed, when you go into a state of fight or flight, to shut off. It shunts blood away. It shunts energy and blood to vital organs, the heart, the lungs. And in your brain, it shunts the blood to the hypothalamus, thalamus, the ancient part of our brain. They call it the reptilian brain. And it's a survival mechanism, because you don't want to be, if you're being chased by a bear, you don't want to be thinking any kind of extraneous thoughts. You're not contemplating, peace and love and harmony. You're thinking, how can I get away from this bear as fast as possible? And the best way is to not think at all. It's like when you touch a hot stove. You just automatically, reflexively will move your hand. You don't have to think, oh, I've got to move my finger because I can, I'm smelling smoke and my, finger hurts. We just automatically do that. It's a survival mechanism. Well, what's happened is we have been systematically controlled by keeping us in a hyper-vigilant state, keeping us in a state of hyper-awareness, a state of fear, alertness. This is not a natural state of being. And you look at people who have been in wars, or people who have PTSD. PTSD is basically where you can't shut your thoughts off. And I'm not speaking from personal experience, but I think, I've had some stuff that you could probably call PTSD, but I wouldn't go that far because I've not been in combat and things like that, or, rape victims or abuse victims. They suffer from true PTSD, where it's debilitating. They can't function in real world because they can't shut these thoughts off in their head, and they can't forget. Basically, they're unable to forget the event. It just keeps playing in their brain all the time. Well, our system is set up to do the same thing. It's about creating stress and creating trauma, and these little micro traumas and macro traumas. Like 9/11 was a big trauma that affected the whole country, and they want us to wallow in it. They want to do 9/11 remembrances every year, and they want to make us feel real sad and make us feel like victims. And that's the opposite mindset, by the way. The victim mindset goes right along with the fear concept. A warrior, a spiritual warrior, spiritual being, is gonna have fear, but they cope with it differently because they have a connection to a higher level. They're not just operating from that level of fear. So I will use my job, for example. If you're operating on that fear level, a lot of mistakes are made. A lot of medical mistakes are made because people's brains shut down in an emergency. And I've been in, I don't want to say thousands of codes, but I've been in more codes, code blues, where you're having to do CPR and resuscitate a patient than I can even count. I worked in a trauma unit for 8 years, and we did it daily. You know, we resuscitated people daily. People died daily. I mean, you saw people with missing limbs, parts of their head blown off from gunshot wounds. Everything you can imagine I've seen. I mean, well, I shouldn't say that, because there's always something you can't imagine and then you see. But what I learned is, when you're in these stressful situations and you do it a lot, you become very good at it because you detach from it. You just become very, very mechanical and very good at what you're doing. The times I function the best at my job is when I'm the most detached from what's going on. If you're emotionally attached to it, you can't function. And it's a weird thing, because it's almost like practice makes perfect. If I have 2 days in a row where we've had to resuscitate babies, the second day, or even later on in the day, let's say I resuscitate a baby in the morning, and then we have another bad delivery in the afternoon, or 2 or 3 that day, you become so good at it that it's like, it's almost scary how efficient you become. And it's because you're able to use your entire brain. It's very, everything is very fluid. But when you're in a state of fear, your brain shuts down, and you're only using that. You're clumsy. You're not as dexterous, where your fingers and hands move well. You're dropping things. You're shaking. Your hands are shaking because of the adrenaline. So it's important to stay in that calm state of mind. And, yoga, meditation, these things, they are training us to be in that state. I always think of, Maharishi would talk about a state of restful alertness. So what you're cultivating when you did the meditation is you're cultivating the state of restful alertness. So you have a sense of detachment, and he likened it to pulling back the bow on a shooting an arrow. When you pull the bow back, you're in this state of, it's a state of like suspended animation. It's like you're ready to let the arrow fly, but you're not quite letting it fly. You're just holding it right there, and it's this like suspended state. And when you do meditation and you do the practices, the whole point of these practices, as far as I can tell, is, well, Sahaj Marg is a little different, but most meditation is to give you a sense of separation, to give you that ability to have some detachment. And Sahaj Marg is a little different because you're actually being cleaned. Sahaj Marg operates on a couple different levels. I've noticed the meditation's different with Sahaj Marg. When I did TM, I would fall much deeper. My meditation was much, much deeper, but I would come out of it and I would feel groggy, and I'd feel almost kind of hungover, like I had gone really so deep, and when I came out, I didn't feel good. And with Sahaj Marg, it's the opposite. I come out of the meditation and I feel lighter, but I don't necessarily feel like I go as deep, but I feel like I'm being elevated, like lifted up, suspended almost up a little bit. And that's because of the pranahuti cleaning off. And we should become lighter and lighter and lighter. But again, back to the fear thing, the fear always wants us to feel heavy. It wants to make us feel, it wants to keep us in that primitive part of our brain, operating from that reptilian part of our brain. And like I said, that part of our brain is necessary for survival in the 3D. If you're getting chased by a bear, you want to have that primal brain working. I mean, you want to be able to fight or flight, But that's not a state of awareness that we want to be in all the time. We want to just be able to be in that state and turn it on and turn it off. Just like at my job, I want to be able to be in that state of restful alertness while performing my duty, because I will be much more efficient like that. And maybe that's why I ended up getting into this job, so that I would have to experience this thousands of times, this feeling of thousands and thousands of repetitions. And maybe it was just something necessary that I needed to learn, to have detachment, and something I can cultivate and use it in my own life, because I have been practicing that in my own life, having a sense of detachment. It's, it's hard. It's almost like you come home to your family and stuff, and all these ideals and all this stuff just goes out the window. And they say, I've heard it said, like, if you think you're a spiritually advanced person, go spend a couple days with your family. And I think that that's the truest test, right? Because they know how to push all of our buttons. They know, how to push us, just like having a sibling. Nobody could push you like your sibling, right? Well, unless you have a teenager, and then you find out a whole new level of that. Or two teenagers, for that matter. Anyway, I just thought I'd put that out there. It's just something to contemplate, because it's important that we recognize these things, and we can actively use our meditation as a tool. The thing about meditation, though, like I said with Sahaj Mark, is there's different levels to it. So there's the conscious aware level that, okay, I'm becoming more detached, and I'm becoming, lighter. I can feel these things. But what we don't know is the deep work that's being done, the deep cleaning, and that's the part we give over to whatever you want to call it, the guide, the master, the higher self, whatever you want to call it, these beings that have come to help us. We're giving that over to them, It's like when you take your car to the mechanic, you're entrusting that they're fixing the engine and doing all these things. And of course, there's bad mechanics. Well, there's bad spiritual gurus too. Babaji warns about that in one of his books. Talks about these fake gurus who are basically just in it for the money. They're in it for the worldly material gain and the power and control and all the negative aspects. But if you use a little discernment, you can see, which ones are real, which ones are fake. And if you see in our day-to-day 3D life, there's so much of the manipulation going on, and you start to become more aware. It makes navigating it, a little more palatable, a little bit easier on you, and not so stressful. And you can kind of just take things as they come and move through things. All right, that's it.